Hello, folks. Mr. Carter here, ready to do home link 5.9. Go ahead and put your name on this if you haven't yet already. And we'll begin. So we're going to make a line plot today with this data we used in the chart over here. And we're going to make a line plot. So let's go through that. So Mrs. Welsh surveyed her students about how much they had grown over the past year. And this is the data they've gathered. So our table here shows student growth over the past year to the nearest half an inch. So, and we have all this information here. We got, again, 1.5, and we'll go through all that. But so let's start with number 1. So plot the data set on the line plot. So first of all, we need a title. So our title would be inches grown in 1 year, because that's what we're measuring here. Okay, so that's our title. And then since we're measuring in half inches, we're going to use half-inch increments. So how do you figure out your lowest versus your highest? Then you want to look at all your data and look and see what our lowest piece of data is and then our highest, and then we're going to go from there. So if we're looking at all our information, doing a quick scan here, I'm noticing that one student only grew a half inch in 1 year. So we're going to start with that data. So we're going to go 1/2, and then we're going to increase the increments by half for every line. So we're going to go 1/2, then we're going to go, our next one would be 1 whole, then it would be 1 and 1/2, then it would be 2, and then it would go to 2 and 1/2, then it would be 3, and then it would be 3.5. Okay, and our label for this data would be the growth in inches. And you can write to the nearest half inch. Okay. So now we just need to go and put our line plots or our X's. So I like to do it one at a time, and then I cross out as I go. So I'm going to just start here, 1 and 1/2. I'm going to put my X. Then I'm going to say 2. And then go put my X. 2.5. Put my X. Half. 2.5. Another X up here. 1. 1.5. Another 1.5. 3.5. 1. 1. 2. 2.5. 1 and 1/2. 2.5. 2. 1.5. Half. 2. 2. Half. 1.5. 1. 2.5. 2. And 1.5. And there you have it. There's our line plot. So now we need to use the line plot to answer the question. So what is the greatest number of inches a student grow in a year? So the greatest is 3.5, because that's the biggest amount that we have here. So it's 3.5 is the greatest number of inches grew in a year, and the least is 1/2. So you look at the smallest piece of information. And now we need to answer what's the difference between the greatest and the least number of inches grown. So your number model with your unknown, so if we're going to go with the greatest, that would be 3.5, and the least is 1/2. So we're going to go 3.5, take away 1/2, and the answer to that is 3. And that is it. And we're going to go down to our practice, where we are asked to circle 3 equivalent fractions in each group. So I'm going to do 4 and 5 for you, and then you're going to have to work on 6 and 7 by yourself, see how you do. So I'm looking at all my denominators, and I'm going to have to figure out which ones of them are equivalent. And again, to get equivalent fractions, you have to multiply the top and the bottom by the same number. So that being said, I'm going to ask myself, okay, what we need like multiples of 4, for example, in order for this to be an equivalent fraction. So if I go 4 times 1, let's say that would be 4, and then 4 times 2 would be 8. So know that 1/4 and either one of these 8s might work. And if I go 4 times 3, I know that 4 times 3 is 12. So there's one right now that I can eliminate. That would be 3, 6, because you can't multiply anything times 4 to get you 6. So I'm just going to cross that one out, because I know that is not an answer. So now I'm going to go and see if 1/4 is equivalent to any of these. So if I go 1/4 and 1/8, well, that can't work because we know that the numerators are the same, and 1/4 is definitely not the same as 1/8, so I can definitely cross that one out. Well, that leaves these 3. So if we're asked to circle 3, then these must be the right answer. But let's prove it. So if I go 4 times 2, that would be, 1 times 2, that's 2. And then 4 times 2 is 8, so that works. And if I go 1 times 3, that's 3. And 4 times 3 is 12. So the 3 equivalent fractions are 1/4, 2/8, and 3/12. So for number 5, zoom in a little bit. Again, I'm going to do the same thing with the 4ths and see if any of these can be equivalent. So I know that I can do 4 times 2 to get me 8. So 4/8 and 6/8 might be a possibility. And over here I have 6. And again, just like for number 4, you know that you can't multiply anything by 4 and get 6. So we can eliminate that. So now I'm going to see if any of these make sense. So if I go to get to 8, I got to multiply the bottom by 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. And 3 times 2 would be 6. So I know that 3/4 and 6/8 are equivalent. And again, that means that 4/8 can't be equivalent. And then if you go over here to get 4 to 12, 4 times 3 is 12, and 3 times 3 is 9. So those are also equivalent. So this one, and this one. So 3/4, 6/8, and 9/12 are all equivalent fractions. So go ahead and work on 6 and 7. Again, try to do that whole, whatever you do to the top, you got to do to the bottom to figure out if these are equivalent or not. And hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, come see me. Have a good night.